Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another podcast, video podcast on the Moments that Matter in the Employee Journey. As you know by now, we bring guests from around the world, and today I'm extremely thrilled to be able to bring Steve on this video podcast. First of all, thank you so very much for joining us on this video podcast, but also Martin, Commercial Director, Luto One, and a friend, thank you very much for joining us as well on this video podcast. So the main topic today is going to be onboarding should be called immersion, question mark, something that was brought up by Steve and we found quite interesting, and we thought it would be relevant to share with the audience to get your perspective on it. But first of all, why not start with an introduction from your side, Steve? Because we've had the chance of discovering a lot about you. It's quite impressive. I'm very honored to have you here, but I'm certain the audience would also like to be able to get to know you a bit more.
Thank you. That's very kind of you, and good to see you guys. And thanks for whoever's tuning in. So my background is, this was not premeditated or by design, but I got very lucky. In the first 15 years of my career, coming out of grad school with a master's in HR, I had the good fortune to report to CHROs in investment banks. The first 15 years was different investment banks where I was reporting to CHROs. And those CHROs, in a sense, were visionary with respect to HR systems. They were visionary in other ways too. But with respect to HR systems, they wanted the leader of HR systems to get immersed in every HR process. So I needed to run comp, particularly the bonus process, which is always interesting in investment banks, and learning and recruiting and performance management, et cetera. So I became pretty well versed across the board in HR process, and I guess that qualified me to take a role that might have been too big for me. Who knows? Whoever judges that, but I took the role of overall head of strategy at PeopleSoft in the heyday of PeopleSoft. Had about 35 people reporting to me. This was 23 years ago, and was giving talks around the world while we were launching product releases, which is tough to be in both places at the same time. They were headquartered in Pleasanton, California, and so that kind of 20-year period basically enabled me to launch my own, hang a shingle, as it were, and be an advisor, analyst, and some may say influencer. I was just recognized again as a major influencer in the industry. So hopefully that wasn't. Hopefully we still have time to have a conversation.
Absolutely. And to be fair, indeed, HR influence, I think, suits you well more on the consulting aspect of being able to share your experience and all your knowledge and being able to discuss with the main actors around. And which kind of brought us to that discussion last time, which is the main title today. And I'm hoping you can explain to us a bit more why is that, because you mentioned prior the term immersion instead of the term onboarding. Why is that? Can we maybe start with how you would define the two and why you separate those two?
Yes, thank you. I feel very strongly about this. I mean, it would probably be one of the top three, if not number one, from my years in corporate HR. Just something that was so obvious that we as an organization and the industry overall were getting wrong. We were using this term onboarding. 90+% of the people, if you were to poll them, and maybe 50% of the people, if you polled them today, and you ask what's onboarding, they would say, well, getting on payroll, getting enrolled in benefits, filling out my forms. I mean, how poor is that? Sorry to be so opinionated here. So I thought, how is this that after 25, 35 years, so many people still see onboarding that way? And so I'm kind of on a one-man campaign, as it were, to reorient thinking around onboarding. And so I thought, well, what would be the catalyst? And if you think about the word immersion, kind of a thumbnail definition is really to experience the essence of something. So getting on payroll and enrolling in benefits and filling out compliance forms is not experiencing the essence of working in an organization. What is experiencing the essence is getting to know your teammates, getting to understand what the culture is all about. The culture has a value system. I know my friend Martin, I think, just posted something about values on LinkedIn. And So for me, getting immersed in the team, in the job, in the culture, and it ideally should even start before day one. How can it start before day one? This is kind of a little handy dandy workflow I came up with, and I've been talking to some HR tech vendors about over the years. Just have a simple workflow that goes to the manager before the employee starts, Friday before Monday, and have the manager answer 5 questions. What's the priorities for the first 30 days? Who should they meet? What should they read, etc. So that gets a person started. Now, one other thing, well, actually, it's one thing, but it's 2 statistics I want to point out to underscore my point. I did not come up with these. These are well kind of certified research stats, and it's research that's been repeated over the years. Roughly 30% across all industries, roughly 30% of all employees leave within 90 days. That's pretty startling. 30% leave within 90 days. Here's another one around the same number, 30%, but a different type of finding. It is that only around 30% of employees feel connected to the mission of their organization. Now, if you don't feel connected to the mission of your organization, then you're not connected to the values, the culture, the priorities, the plans, etc. And you're basically kind of punching a clock, which is not an engaged employee. So it's a long answer, but hopefully it was coherent.
That's a beautiful answer. Thank you very much. Well said. Go ahead.
And Steve, you mentioned that around 30% of employees leaving in the first 90 days, which is a stark number. What are organizations that are keeping those and retaining those employees? What are they doing right? What are they doing differently versus them? Is it more around their listening strategy? Is it around that onboarding phase and that immersion of the company culture? What sort of steps do companies take to get that piece right?
I love the question. And if I was to reduce it in the interest of time to one thing, and then maybe we could elaborate on it and go into other, let's say, antidotes to leaving. So the one thing I would reduce it to is really one word: alignment. Alignment is a mutual thing, and it has to be mutual. It's not the onus is on the employee to be aligned with the company culture and the company values and the company priorities. It is two-way. It's a two-way alignment. And the companies and organizations that are getting it right, in order to have two-way alignment, they need to really know what are the needs, interests, and goals of each individual employee. And not just the first week, but as they change over time. And those are the employees that stay. So that is, to me, that's the most important thing. And this can extend to almost every HR process, but certainly something like performance management. Organizations that are still, just did a talk on this yesterday, organizations that are still doing performance management in the form of a one-way conversation, here's what the organization expects of you. They're not going to keep those people, and they're probably not going to be high performers. But the ones that are doing it along the lines of, you told us, Mr. or Ms. Employee, what you really want to achieve in your career. And so we are trying to craft an experience for you here and match it up with what we need. And hopefully we both come out ahead in the end. And those are the employees that stay.
Yeah, I think everyone has a bad corporate story of those end of the year performance reviews that are completely subjective based on how much your manager likes you and how well you guys get along throughout the year and mainly what you did in that last month before that annual review.
You got it. We talked about this in the talk I gave yesterday. The recency bias, what you did in the last month. You also have a primacy bias, what you did in the first month, because it was first impressions. Yeah. And then another bias, which is interesting, I believe, just as interesting, is kind of the personality bias. People that are outgoing, even if they're not performing at an A level, if they have an outgoing personality, they get a pass on some things, and that's also a bias. Now one of the words that's become spoken more often than it ever was in the past is this word neurodivergent, because you have people that are not just shy personalities, but their brains, they're wired differently. They can perform, but cognitively influences their personality, and that should not be held against them in any way, because the only thing that they should be looked at in terms of a lens is what are the most important things for them to achieve, period. The rest is extra.
Yeah, and Steve, you mentioned around that competency piece. I think that really goes hand in hand with the life of a person in the organization and where they want to go, because not everyone gets hired for the job they want to be in and over the next few years, and they want that opportunity to grow with a company. And companies, of course, want to be able to identify talented individuals. And considering that ever-changing landscape of competencies, how do companies effectively measure and understand those, as they change over time, to ensure that where the company needs people, the skills they need, how does that match the people they have available?
I love that question too, and I speak to it a lot because, and one of the reasons somebody referred to me yesterday is an organizational agility expert. I don't know what that means, but I give a lot of talks on organizational agility.
It sure does, yeah.
And well, at Unleash in America, I gave a talk on org agility. In any event, we live in very fluid times. It's an understatement. We live in fluid times. So in an organization, in the context of an organization, business plans and priorities are changing. When the business plans and priorities change, you need a different mix of skills. And you have different options for addressing those skill gaps. You could, at a macro level, you can address them by hiring a regular employee, getting it contracted, training, redeploying, or outsourcing. But when it comes to an individual, because this talk is mostly about kind of individual and the individual experience, I think AI and now Gen AI are such a breakthrough because they're giving organizations insight into, well, if you don't have this particular skill, how long is it going to take to ramp up? We didn't have that insight before. Not only that, but what level of expertise and competency do we need? We didn't have that insight before. I think we're getting that from AI, and we will get more and more of that from Gen AI. So this is an opportunity for organizations and for employees. And the last thing I'll say about competencies, soft competencies are all the rage. What we're talking about is behaviors, ability to deal with change, ambiguity, conflict, be a connector to other parts of the organization. These are valued every bit as much, and they don't change as much as what's required for the job, if you know what I mean. Those are what I just said before. These are universal. You need them in every setting to be very productive and impactful as an employee. And you have to have a way of observing behaviors and, to your point before, doing it without bias.
Beautiful. Well, as we arrive on the last minute, thank you so very much, Steve, for the lovely input. Martin, thank you very much also for the great questions that you provided as well during this video podcast. As always, big thank you to our partner, Lutuon. Feel free to contact me or Martin if you'd like to know how we would approach this in regards to the specific topic, which is very interesting. Make sure to follow Steve as well on his LinkedIn page if you want to better understand not just his opinion on this, but on many other topics that have an impact on the moments that matter in the employee journey. And to the rest of our audience, thank you very much for tuning in. Stay tuned for future podcasts. Take care of yourself, guys. Bye-bye. See you next time on Byte-sized HR, powered by Lutuon, the collaboration and performance platform that people love.